Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me. It is the weekend edition, and we look forward to this conversation going all over the map on a variety of different topics. And this first segment here, we want to actually introduce both of our guests and talk about two different topics. One that I thought I'd start off with Lathan Watts in studio with us, Director of Public Affairs. Last week, we did mention this, but this is a good example of why we always like to have someone like yourself or Kelly Shackelford or others to address this issue, because you have been fighting this particular case in which Alaska Airlines announced their support for the Equality Act. Now, any listener to Point of View, Lathan knows only so well the damage that would do. Well, Alaska Airlines came out in support of that, and flight attendant Lacey Smith just asked a question. As a company, do you think it's possible to regulate morality? One of the other clients, who's unnamed at the moment because of all the prosecution and persecution she's facing, does America support and does Alaska support endangering the church and some other things? Well, anyway, these were good questions. I think especially let's just use Lacey. Is it possible to regulate morality? Ask the question, and they fire these flight attendants. Where are we on this particular case?
Right. So these two flight attendants, as you said, work for Alaska Airlines, and on the company's intranet, so like an employee-only website, they posted a thing in support of the Equality Act and encouraged employees to comment and requested feedback from the employees.
Yes.
Which I would say in the abstract is actually a good idea. If you're a company and you're going to wade into politics, particularly on a controversial issue, it's probably a good idea to let your employees know and ask for their feedback. The problem is you cannot fire people when you don't like the feedback that you get. And that's exactly what they did. As you said, Lacey simply asked the question, do you as a company believe it is possible to legislate morality? And they fired her because they said even discussing sexuality and gender identity in terms of morality is discriminatory. And so they fired her for, according to them, quote, discriminatory conduct. Now, all she did was pose a question on a post where they invited feedback. And, you know, she believed they wanted feedback, and she gave some. And she was fired for it. And so was the other flight attendant who asked another question. So we have now filed two separate charges on behalf of these two clients of employment discrimination with the federal EEOC. So we've filed those charges. We'll wait to see how the EEOC deals with those charges, and then depending on what the outcome of that is and what our clients want to do, we'll pursue options depending on what the EEOC does.
I might just mention we're going to be talking about some of the other religious liberty issues, but one of my other guests is Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, an individual that, of course, served in Congress, has been the head until recently of the Texas Republican Party. And Colonel West, we wanted to ask you a question about immigration. There seems to be a lot of issues going on right now in places like Del Rio, and I know you've been to the border, so what do we need to know?
Well, I just got back. It was great to be with you, Kerby, and I just got back from down in the Rio Grande Valley. I was in McAllen and Harlingen, and I will tell you that people are living on edge. What is happening down there is unconscionable. The complete sovereignty of the United States of America and the sovereignty of the state of Texas is being undermined, and I cannot understand why we are allowing people who are coming in through the back door illegally to enter into the United States of America, enter into Texas, and we are facing a drug, human sex trafficking crisis and a public health crisis because we're not doing what the Constitution says is supposed to be done on that border, and that is to secure it. So I think that this is a constitutional crisis on top of anything. When you have a federal government that is abdicating its constitutional duty and responsibility, and the Constitution does grant the state to be able to protect itself, and Texas has a 1,254-mile border that unfortunately is wide open.
I might just mention we have posted articles on national sabotage by immigration, which we'll get to a little bit later. One from Victor Davis Hanson, which we always enjoy, on civilization requires deterrence. And Charlie Cook asking the question, why aren't Americans protesting in the streets in light of all the things happening? But I also want to remind people that we have someone else in studio with us, and that's Brad Fisk. And this is the last day of our Truth Team Week, Unchanging Truth, the idea of God's unchanging truth in a changing world and culture. And we need to remind people, if nothing else, Brad, that we are listener supported.
We are indeed. And we just come to you a couple times a year and say, could you help us financially to pay the bills and continue to do what we do, but not only just to continue where we're at, but to get bigger and better and more effective at what we do. And your gifts can help us do that. And another thing that will maybe motivate you a little bit.
Here we go.
We have a $10,000 match challenge on the table. That's a dollar for dollar match. And what that means is if you give $20, what happens?
$50.
20 times is 40.
Yeah,
That's
40.
okay.
Yeah.
Math on the air is really a killer.
Yeah, I was told there would be no math.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. But if you listen to this, if you give a monthly amount, let's say $50 a month, it becomes $100 a month. So it really is strategic as you make a monthly gift. And here's the phone number, 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151. You can also give online anytime at pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
Colonel West, let me come to you for just a minute, because you have actually sat in this chair before as a guest host. You've also been a co-host, and you know the value of supporting an organization like Point of View, and you certainly understand the need to get information out, whether you are the head of an organization, whether you are in Congress, or whether you're running for political office.
No, you're absolutely right. And I firmly support Point of View Radio and what you do there, Kerby, because it's so important that we look at all of these issues that are facing the United States of America from, as you always say, that biblical perspective and that biblical worldview. And you do a great job of articulating that in a way that Christians need to be enthused, and Christians need to be engaged. And furthermore, they need to step up to the plate, because it is an attack on our Judeo-Christian faith heritage. And what your guest just talked about, the fact that two people asked a question, now they lose their job, or if you don't want to have a certain thing injected to your body, you could lose your job. We're getting out of control here in the United States of America, so we need Point of View.
When we come back from the break, I want to talk to somebody who has served in the military, whether or not we have to give people a dishonorable discharge for declining to actually take a vaccine. But before we do that, Brad, we've got a match on the table now, and I'm looking at a number of individuals through the glass, and they're waiting for the phones to ring.
Well, we can help them with that. Here's the phone number to be a part of what's going on here this week in our Truth Team, 800-347-5151. That's toll free, 800-347-5151. We're coming up on a break. That'd be a good time to call and check in with us with your very best gift as the Lord leads. All right.
Let me just mention that we are listener supported, and some of you might say, I've just tuned in today. I haven't been hearing during the conversation that you've had this week. And so if you click on the banner that says Unchanging Truth, you can see a little bit more about that. But especially, we're encouraging people. We think the sweet spot is $50 a month.
It is.
And if you join that, of course, you get the Outlook magazine, you get the booklets, and then you have a choice between the canvas messenger bag or the leather laptop bag.
Those are free gifts just for giving.
With a way to say thank you to you. And if you say, well, I want to see what those are, you can go to the website, pointofview.net. And certainly that's one way that you can actually let us know how you want to respond. But if you would like to call right now, I actually see some people now picking up the phones. And so that's a good thing. 800-347-5151. So we come to a break. That's a perfect time to call. 1-800-347-5151. We'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
My discussion yesterday about the attributes of sound money ended with a sobering realization that the U.S. money supply has dramatically increased in the last year or so. One obvious result has been inflation. There is also every reason to believe that the federal government and the Federal Reserve will print even more money to meet our financial obligations. Most of our economic problems in the last few decades have been currency-based. When you print too much money, you have inflation. Investors will be paid back in devalued dollars. Citizens receiving entitlement payments will be paid in devalued dollars. This is the result of fiat money. In previous centuries, kings and citizens engaged in coin clipping. This was a form of inflation, but at least it was visible. Today, paying back investors and citizens with devalued dollars is less visible and more insidious. In what many regard as one of the most important economic books of the 20th century, British economist John Maynard Keynes noted how inflation affects nations and citizens. He says by a continuing process of inflation, governments can confiscate secretly and unobserved an important part of the wealth of their citizens. He also added, there is no subtler nor sure means of overturning the existing basis of society than to debauch the currency. What's the impact of inflation? Well, the impact is felt on higher prices. In fact, the classical definition of inflation is a rise in the general level of prices of goods and services in an economy over a period of time. Inflation is in our future. A wise investor should take note. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kerby's booklet, A Biblical View on Critical Race Theory, go to viewpoints.info/CRT. Point of View Truth Team. Unchanging truth in a changing world.
We clearly live in difficult times, especially for Christians. Sometimes it feels like the culture is just turning against us quickly. We need to speak up with compassion, but we need to speak up with truth in the way that Jesus did. That's one reason why I'm a big fan of Point of View, is they're dealing with cutting-edge, controversial subjects that the church sometimes doesn't want to deal with. But they do their homework, they do it informed, they also do it in a way that's practical so we understand the issues but know what we can do about them. I often hear as I travel around the country from people, they've listened to a show, they've been following on the website, so it's evident to me that Point of View is making a difference. So if you want to make a difference, especially today in our culture that's becoming increasingly hostile in some ways to the Christian faith, Point of View is standing up for truth and they need your help.
Point of View Truth Team. Unchanging truth in a changing world.
John McDowell, again, encouraging you to support this ministry. And again, we have with us Colonel Alan West by phone, Lathan Watts in studio, and Brad Fisk. And Brad, I see a number of people watching the phones but not answering the phones.
Yes, we're in the middle of a $10,000 match challenge just started a few moments ago. What that means is any gift you give, a single gift of $100 becomes $200. Monthly gift, if you have a $50 a month pledge that you want to put in, it becomes $100. This is real, guys. This is real money. And we just need you to respond. $10,000. Dollar for dollar match. Please give us a call at 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. You can always give at pointofview.net, pointofview.net.
Colonel Alan West with us. And again, you served 22 years, as I understand, in the military. And you know that there are certain actions and in areas of disobedience that will result in a dishonorable discharge. But what are your thoughts, having served in the military, about the argument being made now that if a person does not take a vaccine, that's enough to dishonorably discharge them from the military and probably have that black mark on their record for the rest of their lives?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Kerby. If you get a dishonorable discharge from the United States military, guess what? If you go to purchase a firearm on the 4473 background check, it asks, have you ever had a dishonorable discharge from the United States military? And therefore, you lose your Second Amendment rights. And so for people to have to follow an order, and this is what I've told a lot of members of the military currently and their families, it is illegal, it is immoral, and it is unlawful. It is unethical to tell people that are not being deployed into a combat theater of operations that they have to take this specific shot in the arm. And the numbers are very telling. You've only had about 20, maybe 25 members of the United States military that have lost their lives attributed to COVID, but yet you've had close to 80 members of the United States military that have had complications, to include death, based upon the shot that they have received. And think about this. We have about 250, maybe about 260, one-fourth of our United States Navy SEALs that are being told that they don't take this shot in the arm, they're not going to be able to deploy, and furthermore, they're facing being put out of the United States military. Think about how much money goes into training a United States Navy SEAL.
Yes.
And when you look at what just happened in Afghanistan, we need our special operators. So this is incredibly, disconcerting that we would put our national security at risk for some of the healthiest, some of the strongest people that we have in our country.
Let me come to Lathan Watts. And Lathan, if you go to firstliberty.org, the first thing pops up is, of course, the one we talked about, Alaska Airlines. But if you look at the top, there's a section where people can find out more about a religious exemption, and they can download that. And I have heard that you have received more than 1,000 phone calls, which is why you have that downloaded. And you have, of course, one particular department of First Liberty with the military. That'd be Michael Berry. And I understand he's been getting a lot of calls as well from people in the military. What's going on?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Mike has been extremely busy on the phone with members of the military who are concerned about this very thing, about being forced to take a vaccine that they have questions about, or religious convictions that would not allow them to take the shot. And we have had in the number of in excess of 1,000 phone calls in the last 2 weeks, and that's why we put the resource on the website. We're directing people there and asking them to go there first. It's a free download. It is basically a toolkit on how to request an exemption based on your religious beliefs. It's categorized by whether or not you work in private industry, work for government, work or in the military.
Yes,
and we need folks to read through that first and use that to kind of craft your own request for an exemption and submit that before you try to call in, because there's just too many phone calls and we're afraid we're going to miss something. So please do that first. And then if you request that exemption is denied, you can come back to the website and fill out the Get Legal Help form on the website, which is also much easier for us to track than for you to call us and tell us that your exemption was denied. So, it's just as Colonel West said. I mean, it's extremely concerning for those of us who sleep under the blanket of protection these people provide, and for the people whose livelihood and career in the military is on the line. So that's why First Liberty exists. You do not have to be a Christian in the military for us to help you. We represent people of all faiths, and the exemption based on religious beliefs is not exclusive to one faith or another. So I would encourage people to go to the website and read through that and stay in touch with us that way.
Brad, I was just thinking that some people listening right now say, I'm so glad there's Point of View because I didn't even know where to go to find that information. Right. And I ran into someone the other day who says, you're kind of a religious guy and you do talk shows. You know any place where people can find out more about a religious exemption? And pull out my phone and show where it was.
That's great.
But again, this is on the website, pointofview.net. And lots of times people saying, well, if I support you, am I supporting the radio program? Yes. Am I supporting all the material you've posted? Yes. Am I supporting the videos? Yes. There are a lot of different aspects of support that come when you actually make your pledge right now.
The radio program obviously is the most visible, but we have an incredible array of a monthly magazine, a monthly booklet, a single topic, and we have tons of materials. You're posting stuff every day on the website that we would never find anywhere else had it not been for Point of View. So that's a great reason to give. Another great reason to give right now is every dollar you give is doubled. There's a $10,000 match challenge on the table, and you can get a hold of us by calling 800-347-5151. It's a 2 to 3 minute phone call. You're on and off. 800-347-5151. You can do it anytime at pointofview.net. There's everything there you need to know.
And again,
pointofview.net.
We want to certainly get it going. I'm starting to see some calls coming in, and let's see if we can fill up all the lines. But even if we do, just hold on, because if you, for some reason, are on hold, as soon as somebody hangs up, they'll pick that up immediately. But Colonel West, as we go to a break, we've been focusing on the military, and I thought I've got to ask you at least one more question. You saw the withdrawal from Afghanistan. This seems to be one of the most embarrassing aspects of the military in at least my lifetime. What are your thoughts?
You're absolutely right. I spent 2.5 years in Afghanistan, and what was so disturbing was that on the 20th anniversary and remembrance of September 11th, the Taliban held an inauguration ceremony, and the individuals that we had taken off the battlefield had in Guantanamo Bay, who were released under the Obama administration, were reinstated as the leaders of the Taliban. And now we have an Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan that is more potent and more capable because of the debacle and the strategic, operational, and tactical failure that left $85 to $90 billion of weaponry and equipment and left Americans behind enemy lines. So this is unconscionable, and it just really reflects a lack of understanding, leadership, competence, and pure ineptness on this current administration.
We've been talking about the military, and as we go to a break here, I would love to hear from some of you that have served in the military. We'll never be able to thank you enough for your service, but you probably have friends and neighbors and family members and others that have served in the military, so this would be a great time for us to hear from you, because when we come back from the break, we're going to talk about what's going on in Congress, a former member of Congress, and I know this $3.5 trillion money is actually phony numbers and all sorts of issues about that, so we're going to get into those topics, but if nothing else, Brad, we need to remind people we do have a match on the table.
We do, and we're going to just trust the Lord is going to help our listeners to step up and support us, because every dollar you give, whether monthly or a single gift, is doubled up to $10,000. 800-347-5151. We've made it easy to do in 2 to 3 minutes of your time. 800-347-5151, and you can go to pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
It's a good time to go because you want to hear everything that we're going to be talking about, so this is a perfect time for you to call. It's a dollar for dollar match, so that is on the table. We certainly do need to hear from you. And by the way, if you've been waiting for the last day, well, this is the last day, so we need to hear from you right now. 800-347-5151 or pointofview.net. I'll be right back.
Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. That's why in nearly 50 years of broadcasting, Point of View has stayed committed to our mission to help people live out God's truth. Political debates change from one election year to the next. Hot-button controversies come and they go. As Christians in a changing world, we must rely on God's unchanging truth. If we know how to apply His truth to our lives, it doesn't matter what comes next. We'll be equipped to face it. Yet so many Americans, even believers, lack a biblical worldview. They want to walk in God's truth, but they've never heard someone apply it to daily life the way that we do on Point of View. You can change that by joining the Truth Team today. By joining the Truth Team, you can have a lasting impact equipping tens of thousands of Americans to live out God's truth for decades to come. Join now at pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Kerby Anderson.
Back once again, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about what's going on in Congress. And again, just to set the scene, first of all, we have a budget that needs to be enacted by the 1st of October. It'll be a continuing resolution because we haven't passed a budget in decades. We also need to increase the debt limit, the debt ceiling, which has been done by the House, but not by the Senate. And you have a crisis at the border. You have all sorts of other crises that we've been talking about this week. And in the midst of this, we are being convinced that we need to spend an additional $3.5 trillion on top of all of that. And one of the things for my two guests, I want to go around the round table. This week we've talked about, first of all, that that includes having the IRS look at any transaction in your bank account over $600, which is virtually everybody. We've talked about how it actually benefits those people in unions, but not 90% of the people that aren't in unions. And then today you have the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal saying the $3.5 trillion number is a phony number. Oh, what a surprise here, because what they do is they phase out some of the expensive things at 2025, so it doesn't even necessarily include 10 years and a variety of other topics. And so one of the articles we've posted is by Charlie Cook. Why aren't Americans protesting in the streets? Colonel Alan West, of course, you have served in Congress and represented Florida's 22nd district. You know some of the budget gimmicks that have been used in the past, but this is beyond the pale. What are your thoughts?
Well, this is exactly what you get when the progressive socialist left is in control there in Washington, D.C. They have the House, the Senate, and the White House. And this is just a laundry list of all the things that they want to get more Americans dependent upon the government largesse. And what should really be disconcerting for Americans is that when you look at all of these illegal immigrants that have come into the United States of America this fiscal year 2021, we're talking about 1.3, 1.4 million apprehended. That doesn't mean deported. And then another 350 to 400,000 that are what they call the getaways. Those people are going to get taxpayer-funded benefits. We just saw the folks get on buses who came here from Haiti. Well, they actually came here from South America and Central America. But you're just looking at the give-all, and I really think this is just bribery to buy votes, because that's the only way that leftism, the socialism, communism, statism, Marxism can stay in power is by deception or coercion, intimidation, threats, as your host there talked about, and ultimately it could be violence. And so I think it is really concerning, and that's why they know that the clock is ticking till next November, and they're going to try to do everything they possibly can to destabilize our country.
Lathan Watts, let me come to you, because not only are you a lawyer, not only you worked on a number of political campaigns, you're a history major, and you've looked at the history of what happens when a government, a civilization spends too much and devalues its dollars, and that seems to be what's happening right now.
Yeah, and we've already seen just in the 9 months of this year, inflation on the rise, and inflation is really the silent tax on the poor, because it takes away the value of what money you do have. Whether you're paid by the hour or on salary, your wages haven't gone up, but the cost of everything is going up. So what money you have doesn't go as far as it used to, and that disproportionately impacts the bottom tax brackets and people that are struggling financially. And so fiscal policy, whether or not you're paying attention to it, absolutely impacts your life on a daily basis, maybe more than any other domestic social policy that's put in place by any government. And, I know I've said on here before, the last president to leave office with a budget and federal workforce smaller than he started with was Calvin Coolidge. Now, I'm under no, delusions that we could, wave a magic wand and go back to 1789. I would like to. But I'd be okay with us shooting for going back to the days of Calvin Coolidge. That's a good economic policy to shoot for. And you're right. I mean, these numbers, please nobody tell the Biden administration there's a number higher than trillion. Just please. Because this is monopoly money. I mean, this is no different than the crisis we saw in Greece, where, their economy completely imploded when the reality of what they were doing hit home, and we are not immune to that. Really, the only protection that we have is that the dollar is the world's reserve currency. But China would love for their currency to be the world's reserve currency and would not be above pointing out in Emperor has no clothes style, hey, the Americans aren't any different than Greece. And if it triggers a worldwide global depression, so be it, as long as we get to become the new world reserve currency. So this is an existential threat. It's a national security issue. It's a domestic economic issue. It is an issue for your children and their children, because the amount of debt in this country it cannot be paid by the current taxpayers. It will take 2 to 3 generations to pay it back.
And Brad, one of the reasons the most recent booklet that's going out to our listeners is on money, because we see some of that happening. Even this week, we've had Chuck Bentley on, we've had Gary Bauer, we've had a number of people that have talked about some of these issues, because we want to prepare our listeners for the fact that some things are changing, and we're going to focus this next year on some more of these economic issues. We
are. And, money touches everybody. That you were just saying, it touches everybody's life one way or another every single day. And, I just was sitting here listening to you, and I'm thinking, people need to pray. We need to pray and ask the Lord's grace and mercy on us as these ridiculous spending limits. I mean, the fallout is incredible. And you can do something about it, because we're going to keep talking about it no matter what. Here is what's happening. We have a $10,000 match challenge right now. We're trying to get everything funded for the coming year, but we need your help. 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151. You can give at pointofview.net, and a monthly gift, a single gift, every dollar you give right now, up to $10,000 is doubled. 800-347-5151. Let
me come to the website, because we have a take action item, and I want to hear from Colonel West about that, because our take action item a few months ago was H.R. 1, which would have federalized the elections and allowed those individuals that we did not elect to make decisions about us in ways that would supersede the state. The most recent one is on H.R. 4, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. And a lot of people say, well, that's not so bad, because all it simply does is let the Justice Department, unelected bureaucrats, decide about our elections.
There's a treat.
And there is something, Colonel West, you've been looking at since you were the head of the Texas Republican Party. We haven't had as much voter fraud in Texas as in some states, but that's one of the reasons why the legislature more recently, not only in Texas, but also in your former home state of Georgia, decided maybe we need to firm up some of these election laws.
No, you're absolutely right. I think that the best thing, just the same with healthcare, you want to have preventative measures. And so even though we did not have rampant issues, we did have some issues here in Dallas County and also down in Harris County. We've got to make sure those things aren't repeated. But the real danger is with H.R. 1 and H.R. 4, when you look at H.R. 4, we would not be able to do what we just saw our legislature do, which was to pass election integrity laws here to strengthen our laws and have our own election laws on the books, unless it was approved through the Department of Justice. And that's the thing that is very troubling. So we have got to look at what is happening. And H.R. 1 is even more dangerous, because H.R. 1 says that there will be no picture ID to vote, and you're letting in millions of people here illegally. There will be universal mail-in ballots, the unsolicited ballots. That's going to be the standard. You can have same-day voter registration, same-day voting, and you will have no more voter registration roll review. Those things are very dangerous for this country.
And again, that's one of the reasons I wanted to highlight that, because when you support Point of View, you're supporting the radio program, all the commentaries, of which the one today has to do with the issue of money and inflation, but also the take action items. And we've already identified around this table a few things in the next few weeks we are going to encourage people to take action items on. And that's one of the reasons why supporting Point of View.
It is. And very simply put, dollar for dollar match challenge on the table. I'd love to get this cleared up by the top of the hour. Wouldn't that be cool?
That'd be great.
That'd be great. So let's see if we can reach for the finish line here. 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. And I've got a couple phones open right now, 800-347-5151.
When we come back from the break, I want to hear both of these individuals talk a little bit about what can we do. Well, we've got an election taking place, and a lot of people say, well, that's premature. No, we got primaries coming out right now. And as I've said before, if you don't like your choices in November, pay attention to the primary. So it's already sort of an election season. Want to hear what Colonel Alan West has to say about that. And, of course, Lathan Watts has worked on governor's campaigns and senatorial campaigns, and so I'll make some perspective there. But this is a perfect time for you to make that phone call. It is 800-347-5151. It's a dollar for dollar match. So your $100 becomes $200. Your $50 becomes $100. So give us a call, 800-347-5151 or pointofview.net. Be right back.
Right now, Elizabeth McDonough, the Senate parliamentarian, may be the most powerful public official you've never heard of. The debate in Congress on a proposed $3.5 trillion spending bill depends in great part on the advice she provides. The massive spending bill is jam-packed with progressive priorities, many of which involve big policy changes. Senate Democrats are attempting to pass it using a budget process called reconciliation. Legislation passed under reconciliation must be related more than incidentally to spending and revenue and cannot be filibustered. Hence, it requires only a majority, 51 votes, rather than the 60 a filibuster would require. As the Washington Post points out, progressive senators are trying to stuff a lot into that narrow definition. The bill isn't finalized, but 3 of the plan's proposals look a lot like brand new entitlement programs. One is universal pre-kindergarten. Another is up to 12 weeks of government-paid family leave. And thirdly, there's a proposal for free community college. There are also proposals to extend the COVID emergency child tax credit, expand Medicare, and implement many aspects of the Green New Deal. None of these are safety net programs for the poor. The Wall Street Journal explains they are explicitly designed to make the middle class dependent on government handouts. The parliamentarian is the rule keeper of the Senate. It's a nonpartisan job, and Elizabeth McDonough has held it for 10 years. Her job is to advise senators in a nonpartisan way during legislative battles on what they can and can't do. The Post cites former Senate historian Donald Ritchie, who says the parliamentarian, acting as a sort of umpire, doesn't write the rules, she enforces them. Ms. McDonough heard arguments by senators from both parties about whether granting green cards to some 8 million people here illegally is primarily a budgetary decision. She says it isn't. She knows her stuff. Pray she continues to decide wisely. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Point of View Truth Team, unchanging truth in a changing world.
Hello, I'm O.S. Hawkins, and what a privilege it is to say these few brief words about how much I love Kerby Anderson and how much I respect the ministry of Point of View. You know, in a world we're living in, when their culture is collapsing and crumbling all around us, we see some folks rushing out to condemn the culture. They just maybe beat their Bibles a little harder and yell a little louder, while others compromise the culture and some even condone it. But what I love about Point of View is it confronts our culture every day as Kerby speaks the truth and speaks it in love. So I want to encourage you to support Point of View.
Point of View Truth Team, unchanging truth in a changing world.
Dr. O.S. Hawkins encouraging you to support this ministry. And we have had some phone calls, but I just noticed one individual hung up and is waiting for the next phone call. So again, that's 800-347-5151. Colonel Alan West, I want to come to you for just a minute because you've been in Congress and you, of course, running for office. And I think there are a lot of people that are saying, what can we do? And the other day I had somebody say, I'm looking forward to 2022. And I knew exactly what he meant. I do believe that we might be able to change the complexion of the Congress, but again, we have to be aware of the fact that right now is a time to begin to look at candidates, look at issues, and recognize that even though for many, November 2022 seems like a long way away, some of the primaries and some of the battles are going to be fought right now, aren't they?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And if I can put it into terms that we talk about in the military, any operation has two phases. This has a shaping phase, and then you have a decisive phase. And in the shaping phase, that's where you do the things to set the conditions as you transition and go into that decisive phase so that you can achieve victory. And so that's why Point of View Radio is so important, because you're part of that shaping phase. You're part of that setting the conditions by making sure that people, your listeners, are informed, they're educated, and then part of the decisive phase, they can be activated, and they can go out and they can select those right candidates. But first and foremost, they've got to understand the issues. They've got to understand all the things that are happening, because one of the things you just talked about, all the different crises that we're facing, constitutional crisis, drug trafficking crisis, human and sex trafficking crisis, the public health crisis, national security crisis, foreign policy crisis, economic crisis, oil and gas industry, economic energy security crisis. So we need to have you, Kerby, and your voice that can, once again, put this in a biblical perspective and a biblical worldview so that Christians can, again, be educated, they can be informed, and then they can be activated. That will lead to success, not just for us here in the state of Texas, but all across the United States.
What is so interesting is with all those crises, you would think that the administration wouldn't want to focus on any other crises. But the other day at the United Nations, the president told us, well, we have a climate change crisis, too. So you just cannot make this stuff up. But let me come to Lathan Watts for just a minute, because you've worked on a number of political campaigns, and you recognize the key is right now to pay attention to this. I don't want to hear people complaining that I don't like my choices in November, because a lot of that's happening right now on the ground, isn't it?
Certainly. So the primary campaigns will, for sure, if they haven't started already, will be heating up soon. I mean, here in Texas, they're going to be delayed a little bit because of the delay in getting the census numbers, which leads to a delay in drawing the congressional districts and all the state and Senate districts, which they're in the process of doing right now in special session. So the primaries will likely be, I would say, maybe mid-summer next year. So, but that means the campaigns are going to be cranking up, already. So now is the time to pay attention, because in many areas, the districts are drawn in favor of one party or another. And so the real choice is in the primary. A lot of the districts are, safe R districts. A lot of them are safe D districts. So your biggest moment of impact is in the primary decision. Mm-hmm. And that's, we've got to evaluate the candidates and start sending really the only way we start to right the ship on all the things that we see going on in D.C. We didn't get in this mess overnight. You're not going to fix it overnight. But I truly think we have to start sending a different type of person there. You keep sending the same type of people and expecting different results. That fits the oldest definition of insanity. And you really have to start sending some people who are there, who want to do the job of a legislator, not just play the political game. Not just, deliver a good soundbite or, own people on Twitter or look good on Fox News. Like, there's work to be done, and it's serious work, and we need serious people to do it. And, I hope people will take that into account, whichever primary you're voting in. I mean, you really need to evaluate the candidates, look at their positions. If they won't tell you their position, that's the first indication you shouldn't vote for them. Yeah. But
that's why we have voter guides that we post here.
Exactly. Yeah. Evaluate them, see which ones line up with you principally, and then make a character judgment on, is this person really made for the real work that has to be done.
And again, 30 different senatorial campaigns, actually 33, as well as 435 races for the House of Representatives, governor races, and a variety of others. Almost 30,000 different elections, if you will, taking place. And those are going to be ones where we're going to try to put together voter guides and things of that nature. Colonel West, if people want to contact you, we have a link to your website, westfortexas.com. Of course, we have a link to firstliberty.org. And I know you're a busy individual, so it means a lot that you would give us an hour today here on Point of View.
Oh, look, I love Point of View. It's just been so humbling that you have allowed me to be a guest host and also to be a co-host and continue to be a guest. And our website, West, is the number 4texas.com, west4texas.com. And we just look to being out there and meeting people on the campaign trail.
Well, again, I appreciate you being with us. And next hour, we're going to have Dr. Merrill Matthews with us. But just before we run out of time, we need to mention real quickly, Brad, that we have some people watching phones. I like it when I see people on the phones. And right now, as I look through the glass, I see people watching their phones. So it's time to get those phones ringing again.
It is indeed. This is our Truth Team Week. It's the final day, and we have a $10,000 match challenge. That's right, $10,000 dollar-for-dollar match, which means every gift you give, no matter the size, single gift or a monthly gift, it is doubled up to $10,000. 800-347-5151. That's toll free. Let's light every single line up. 800-347-5151. You can, if you get a busy signal, you can always go to pointofview.net. Pointofview.net. But I can't believe the elections are coming this quick. We have got to gear up and get ready for this. You can help us do it by financially pledging your support. 800-347-5151 or pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
Let's take a break, and when we come back, we're going to be, again, talking with Lathan Watts in studio, and we have Dr. Merrill Matthews coming in studio as well, and we've covered a few issues. We might come back to this issue of why aren't Americans protesting in the streets? Charles Cook is raising that question in light of some of the financial issues we've been talking about, in light of so many other topics, and also this very interesting blockbuster series of revelations that now actually have come out. A letter saying that the whole focus of the Biden administration is to downplay the significant vulnerability of all the immigration in terms of terrorists and narcotic smugglers and all the rest. If this was in the Trump administration, people would know about the letter that we'll be talking about in the next hour. And it is, again, just a good illustration of the fact that even just recently, Representative Dan Crenshaw was saying, he said this in the House, can we just stop pretending that this all happened by chance? We know what's going on behind the scenes, and so we'll get into some of those issues as well. But as we go to our break, this is the perfect time for you to call. By the way, if you wait for the last hour, you're coming down to the last hour, so we need to hear from you. That number is 800-347-5151. We've got all hands on deck. My wife is here. My daughter is here. An individual, one of our writers, is here as well of our staff, so they can take the phone calls, and it's 800-347-5151 or pointofview.net. We'll be right back.
Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. That's why in nearly 50 years of broadcasting, Point of View has stayed committed to our mission to help people live out God's truth. Political debates change from one election year to the next. Hot-button controversies come and they go. As Christians in a changing world, we must rely on God's unchanging truth. If we know how to apply His truth to our lives, it doesn't matter what comes next. We'll be equipped to face it. Yet so many Americans, even believers, lack a biblical worldview. They want to walk in God's truth, but they've never heard someone apply it to daily life the way that we do on Point of View. You can change that by joining the Truth Team today. By joining the Truth Team, you can have a lasting impact, equipping tens of thousands of Americans to live out God's truth for decades to come. Join now at pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, friends and society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour, and also the last hour of this week of Truth Team Week. And we have in studio with us, of course, Lathan Watts, but also our adding to the round table, Dr. Merrill Matthews, resident scholar with the Institute for Policy Innovation. And Dr. Matthews, one of the articles we've posted by Charles Cook is a good one. Why aren't Americans protesting in the streets? Talking about the fact that there has been almost an assault on the federal budget. If you knew somebody who was making, in round numbers, $38,000 a year, but spending $68,000 a year, and had credit card debt of essentially $287,000, you would say they're in real trouble. And then if the solution was to raise their credit limit, you can kind of see what I'm talking about, because if you add some more zeros, that's exactly where we are, the federal government. We are spending about $6.8 trillion. We're only bringing in $3.8 trillion, and we have $28 trillion plus in terms of debt. So the first step is to raise the debt ceiling. The second debt responsibility is to try to come up with a continuing resolution, because we haven't had a budget in decades, have we?
We haven't had one for a while. And to answer your question, why isn't the public upset about this? I'm beginning to think it may be, and I think this is attributed to Stalin, that one death is a tragedy, a million deaths is a statistic.
Yeah.
And I think we may be there. So if the debt were small and we were increasing it a little bit, I still remember, some years ago when the debt was not all that huge, but we were having big fights over increasing it. But now it's like another $3 trillion, $4 trillion. What this year? What difference does that make?
Yeah, and you've been in Congress a number of times testifying on healthcare policies and energy policy and all the rest. And you know that there are some members of Congress that are very frustrated with that, but it doesn't seem that any significant change has taken place in decades now.
It doesn't. And when Republicans were in control in the 2000s, we were hoping that we would see them control the spending and reduce the debt and so forth. They didn't do it. And increasingly, I think people are sort of the opinion that Democrats don't care about the debt. Republicans will vote for debt increases many times, but just feel bad about it.
Let me take a phone call, because some people want to weigh in on that issue. So we'll go to Massachusetts, WSEW. George, what would you like to say?
Hi, how are you?
Very good. What's on your mind?
I just wanted to say I haven't heard much talk about the idea of taxing more equitably as a way to solve some of this problem, a big part of it. In other words, we cut the tax rate on people that had the most money. Of course, they were making jobs and so on, but still, it just doesn't seem like the American way not for them to get such a low tax rate. So why can't we raise their taxes and cut spending?
It's a good question, but we actually have a very progressive tax system right now. When you look at what the higher income people pay, and I haven't looked at this for a few months, but my recollection is the top 10% pay something like of earners pay like 60% of the taxes. The bottom half, George, I think it's George, the bottom half of taxpayers pay about 3% of all income taxes. So it's a very progressive. If you're in the bottom half of the income bracket, you pay very, very little taxes, even though it feels like it hurts, but in relation to it. So we actually have a very progressive system. And my concern right now is that not Donald Trump, Joe Biden says he's not going to tax anybody who makes less than $400,000 a year. Well, they want to raise, I'll just take an example, they want to raise the tax on cigarettes. Well, that tends to be used more by lower income people, and they want to significantly raise that tax. Now, whether you like it or not, I don't smoke, but you're going to be taxing lower income people if you raise that tax.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Just as you said, the folks that make the most are paying the most taxes. It's difficult to raise taxes on people who don't pay them, and close to 50% of Americans don't pay any taxes. They think they do because it comes out of their paycheck, but then they end up getting a refund come tax time. And even if you confiscated every dollar of the top 1% of this country, you couldn't run this country for a day. It's a self-defeating. It may make us feel better. Oh yeah, go tax the rich. It's cutting your nose off to spite your face. It would not run this government at the way that we spend money for a day if you took every penny they have. And just as the caller mentioned, I never in my life got a job from somebody poorer than me. These are the people that create jobs in this country.
You want to work for me?
Right. So it's a good slogan, and politicians toss it around all the time. But talk is cheap, and facts don't lie.
But let me address this one aspect of it, because we do have different taxes for capital gains and some of the other things. So if you're an investor and you're making long-term capital gains, usually described as over a year, and you're making money from that, from the sale of things, then you probably do have a lower percentage that you're paying, because we want to try to encourage people investing long term. And one of the things that we found out from Warren Buffett is, he used to famously say, I actually pay a lower percentage of taxes than my secretary. I'm sure he paid more taxes, but he may have paid a lower percentage. But things like that in the tax code actually do sort of allow people to make it sound like, well, why is he paying that little when I'm paying this much?
And again, these are the kind of conversations that even when I watch CNN, NBC don't actually take place. People actually bring in some facts and figures into this. And Brad, I don't know where we are, but we are, I think oh, good. I want to know, did we meet the match? How are we doing?
We did not meet the match yet.
Okay.
What happened is last hour, some friends of the ministry got together and made a $10,000 match challenge, and they created these funds, and they get to go into our funds as soon as they're matched. Let me repeat that. It's a $10,000 match, dollar for dollar. We're a little under halfway there right now.
Okay.
So we got a pretty big mountain to climb, and it has to be done by the end of this hour.
Wow. Okay.
So the way it works is that money's on the table, but until it's matched by a listener with their funds, it does not go into our total. So it's kind of serious, and we have need of the funds to continue to do what we do bigger and better. And you're going to help us if you could, please. 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. You can also give on our web at pointofview.net. That's pointofview.net. A dollar for dollar challenge up to $10,000. How about somebody giving a $1,000 gift? Maybe 3 people giving a $1,000 gift.
Good,
and
sir.
that would be doubled quickly.
So again, let's encourage you to do that. And as we've said, we brought Warren Kelly in earlier in the week just to talk about the fact that we're kind of behind of where we've been in previous years. And again, we know that for some of you, maybe this has been difficult because of some of the financial strains. And if you can't, we just encourage you maybe to call and we'll pray for you. But most importantly, we're hoping some of the rest of you might be able to step forward and help us out. And so we, again, give you that number, 800-347-5151. Or again, the website is pointofview.net. Now, we come back. I wanted to pick out the other point because George said cut spending. I can't remember the last time we cut spending, but that's one issue I want to put on the table. But then also to make people pay their fair share. Senator Elizabeth Warren has talked about a wealth tax, taxing wealth rather than income. Wanted to get some thoughts around the table. I suspect I know what those are going to be, but again, you want to join us then. But before we do so, 800-347-5151.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
My discussion yesterday about the attributes of sound money ended with a sobering realization that the U.S. money supply has dramatically increased in the last year or so. One obvious result has been inflation. There is also every reason to believe that the federal government and the Federal Reserve will print even more money to meet our financial obligations. Most of our economic problems in the last few decades have been currency-based. When you print too much money, you have inflation. Investors will be paid back in devalued dollars. Citizens receiving entitlement payments will be paid in devalued dollars. This is the result of fiat money. In previous centuries, kings and citizens engaged in coin clipping. This was a form of inflation, but at least it was visible. Today, paying back investors and citizens with devalued dollars is less visible and more insidious. In what many regard as one of the most important economic books of the 20th century, British economist John Maynard Keynes noted how inflation affects nations and citizens. He says by a continuing process of inflation, governments can confiscate secretly and unobserved an important part of the wealth of their citizens. He also added, there is no subtler nor sure means of overturning the existing basis of society than to debauch the currency. What's the impact of inflation? Well, the impact is felt on higher prices. In fact, the classical definition of inflation is a rise in the general level of prices of goods and services in an economy over a period of time. Inflation is in our future. A wise investor should take note. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kerby's booklet, A Biblical View on Critical Race Theory, go to viewpoints.info/CRT. Point of View Truth Team, unchanging truth in a changing world.
Point of View was the first and most important program that announced to the world the need for H.R. 6, which was the key battle that we fought years ago with Marlon Maddox to stop the eradication of homeschooling by Congress, in a bill called H.R. 6. That was the high point, perhaps, but faithfully over the years, this radio program has stood for faithfulness and stood for truth and stood for homeschooling rights. And I would just encourage every homeschooler out there to call and pledge something. Whatever amount it is, call and pledge something and be a part of the station and program that has been so important to the preservation of homeschool freedom.
Point of View Truth Team, unchanging truth in a changing world.
Michael Ferris, and of course talking about his days when he was at the Homeschool Legal Defense Fund. But I thought we might, for just a minute, before we get back to the topic, recognize that he now heads up Alliance Defending Freedom. And we talked about that the other day, started by Marlon Maddox and D. James Kennedy and Larry Burkett and Don Wildman. And the list is very, very long of individuals that have, but he heads that up. And one of their cases, I thought maybe I'd come to Lathan for just a minute, actually has to do with the fact that right now the Biden administration is trying to force Christian schools to violate their belief on sexuality. And so they're actually defending the College of the Ozarks, which is in Branson, Missouri area. And it all has to do with the fact that because of this, they're now saying that fair housing applies to even things like sexual orientation and gender confusion, all the rest. So you can end up with boys and girls in a co-ed bathroom room in a Christian college. And this just is something that is, first of all, unconstitutional because this was not passed by Congress. And second of all, is really trying to force Christian schools to violate their deeply held religious beliefs.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's you're exactly right. It's unconstitutional. But this is what happens when you have an administrative state. This is what happened, I mentioned earlier, like electing the right people to Congress to do the job of Congress. Congress is supposed to make law, not the executive branch. But when you have created, going all the way back to Woodrow Wilson, this executive branch administrative state that then pass executive agency rules or regulations, and you may not want to call them laws, but violate one of them and find out what happens to you. You'll find out it is a law, and it's being done without any representation by the people because it's done in the executive branch. The College of the Ozarks and other colleges like the one that I went to have deeply held religious beliefs on issues related to sexuality and gender, and they have the right to operate those schools in accordance with them. And so this is it's an important case. I think it's going to be at the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals.
Eighth Circuit.
So hopefully, they get a good decision out of the Eighth Circuit. If not, I suspect they will go to the Supreme Court. If the Supreme Court takes it and hears it, then that could end up being, a landmark case nationwide. But hopefully they win at the Eighth Circuit and at least, give some relief there. And then what happens is when you have a precedent set at a Circuit Court of Appeals, then if something similar is going on in another area of the country, you can cite to that other circuit. It's not, that's right. It's not binding, but it's at least persuasive to say, look, the Eighth Circuit already dealt with this. And then if you're, say, in a school in the Ninth Circuit will likely rule against you. However, one of the ways to get a case to the Supreme Court, it's not a guarantee, but it helps your chances a whole lot, is if you have a split in the circuits on the same issue. If you have two circuit courts of appeals deciding the same issue two different ways, the Supreme Court almost has to take that case because you cannot allow the First Amendment to mean one thing in Missouri and something the exact opposite in California. Yeah. So it's going to be interesting to see, what the Eighth Circuit does with it and where things go from there.
Brad, that's one of the reasons we're encouraging people to support Point of View, because they may have just heard about this the other day when we were talking about this. And we've posted that article by Julie Marie Blake, who actually, I think she was at one time like an assistant solicitor general in the state of Missouri, but saying, just imagine taking your daughter to school as you're saying goodbye, find out that her roommate is, as she says, a male. And what? And then, most people assume when they put their kids in Christian colleges that we're not going to have co-ed rooms and co-ed dorms and co-ed bathrooms and showers, right?
Yeah, that's correct. And I got a question for our listeners. Wouldn't you want to know about this? Wouldn't you want to have some support about this? If this was real and becomes reality, would you not want to have a voice that says, wait a minute, this is wrong? That's what Point of View provides, is that voice for basic rights and wrongs. There are things that are godly and things that are not. And your gift of support will help us to continue to be that voice. 800-347-5151. There's a match challenge on the table. It's a little over $5,000 remaining of the original $10,000, and we need to get the match cleared up by the end of the hour. So please just take a few moments and make that phone call or go online. 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151.
And again, as we said, we are waiting to the very last hour to actually meet the match. And I'd kind of like to meet that in the next couple of minutes before the bottom of the hour. But we did put a question on the table, and George said, tax more people, but the other part of it is cut spending. We did cut spending sort of accidentally, didn't we, Dr. Merrill Matthews, a while back?
We did, and we sort of worked ourselves into it. I think it was the 2011 budget deal where they couldn't come up with an agreement on this, and this was in the summer, and so they had a panel that was meant to try to do something and come up with some kind of a decision. They couldn't come up with something. And so this budget deal went in, which had what was called the sequester. And the sequester actually cut spending. And that was the first time Congress actually cut spending programs. And spending in those programs went down. So it actually worked for a little while. But Congress being Congress, including with the help of Republicans, eventually came back and said, well, we really need some money right now, so let's put the sequester on hold and we'll come back and get it later. And they never come back and get it later. So they can do it, but they don't do it very often.
You know, Lathan Watts, let me come to you, because if indeed you have to go all the way back to Calvin Coolidge to find a real cut, I think some listeners are saying, wait a minute, I'm reading all the time, if you read the Washington Post, New York Times, or whatever, their cut. And what it is that in Washington speak, if you cut the increase, even if you pay an individual more this year than you did last year, only in Washington, D.C., that's called a cut, right?
Exactly. I mean, it is the bizarro world where an increase is a cut.
Yes.
Only in Congress could you get away with saying something like that. You know, and I point out a lot of times, you talk about like a group of birds is called a flock.
Yeah.
You know, a group of this animal called a herd. Do you know what a group of baboons is actually called? A Congress.
So
I don't think that's a coincidence.
I don't think that's a
We
coincidence.
don't make this stuff up.
You do not make that stuff up. Dr. Merrill Matthews, just before we take a break, one of the things we always hear is another budget trick, and I wanted to come to you since you've written about this, is waste and fraud. And you have done more research and have books and chapters and books about Medicare fraud and Medicaid fraud and all sorts of things. But this idea of cutting waste and fraud sounds like a good idea, just doesn't seem to happen.
Never really happens. And they want to expand Medicare and Medicaid significantly in the budget, so you can expect even more fraud coming. Fraud in Medicare, and it's not, we call it improper payments, but in Medicaid, the federal government typically says the improper payments in Medicaid runs about 10 to 12% a year. Over the past couple of years, it has gone up to 25%. And just 40% of the births in the country are done through Medicaid. I think in New Mexico, 75% of the births are paid for by Medicaid. It is a huge program that covers a lot of people, and the fraud is rampant there, and they're gonna allow even more of it if we get this through.
Well, again, I want you to say, where do I hear that? Do you hear that even on MSNBC, or do I hear that on NBC, or do I hear that on CNN? Do I hear it even on National Public Radio? Well, you hear it on Point of View, and there's just a real need, Brad, sometimes to just speak the truth, and that's the theme this week, unchanging truth, in a culture that is changing, and in really sometimes a media that doesn't even want to tell the truth about some of these issues.
That's true. And we're here standing in the gap. And, we've been doing this for a long time, for decades, coming up on our 50th anniversary next year. So please help us. That's all we're asking is there's a dollar for dollar match challenge on the table. Every dollar you give is doubled. That $50 a month you pledge becomes $100 a month to the total. 800-347-5151. I don't want to leave any of that money on the table. And by the way, go to our website at pointofview.net. You can see some thank you gifts that we're giving monthly donors, and check it out because there's some really cool stuff there at pointofview.net. You can also make your pledge there as well online. 800-347-5151.
And again, the website, pointofview.net. We'll come back and kind of wrap up. I'll let you know how we're doing on the match. And, of course, we still have some great conversation going to be taking place between Lathan Watts and Dr. Merrill Matthews. Again, that number, 800-347-5151.
Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. That's why in nearly 50 years of broadcasting, Point of View has stayed committed to our mission to help people live out God's truth. Political debates change from one election year to the next. Hot-button controversies come and they go. As Christians in a changing world, we must rely on God's unchanging truth. If we know how to apply His truth to our lives, it doesn't matter what comes next. We'll be equipped to face it. Yet so many Americans, even believers, lack a biblical worldview. They want to walk in God's truth, but they've never heard someone apply it to daily life the way that we do on Point of View. You can change that by joining the Truth Team today. By joining the Truth Team, you can have a lasting impact equipping tens of thousands of Americans to live out God's truth for decades to come. Join now at pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Kerby Anderson.
Final half hour, and as we've said before, the final half hour of our Truth Team Week. So if you have not made that phone call, please take the time to do that right now. 800-347-5151. That's on the table. We have all sorts of other things to talk about, but I thought we'd also hear from some of our listeners about why they support Point of View.
Point of View Truth Team.
You know, I can't go to Washington. I can't do those things, so the only way that I can help is the way that God has provided for me, and to give some of that back to you guys. So, like you said, partnering with Point of View, because, you know, you can't do it alone. Thank you very much for what you guys do. Believe me, it's a needed thing, and I just hope everybody certainly would get on the bandwagon with you.
I can't afford not to support you. Point of View gives me a voice, and I just appreciate you. And I've been here listening for years, so I thank you, and I do. Again, I said I can't afford not to support you because I want you to keep going.
I'm 25 years old, and I started listening to Point of View about 4 years ago, and it has changed the way that I think and the way that I view the world around me.
My husband and I are your supporters. We just really appreciate the show and the people you bring on.
Point of View Truth Team.
Back once again, we have a match on the table. That's a $1 match. And if you've been waiting to the last few minutes of the program, then your time has come. We do, again, have a $1 match. It was $10,000. I think we are pretty close. I don't know where we are.
We're a little below halfway, so we got a ways to go. And so it's time to step up, if you would, please, and help support Point of View so we can continue to do what God has called us to do. 800-347-5151. Let me go around the round table. Dr. Merrill Matthews, of course, you are a health care expert. You know, somebody just a minute ago says, I can't go to Washington. Well, you go to Washington and have testified on all of this. Mm-hmm. But I saw something the other day. You know, we have occasionally talked about these issues of the vaccines. And here you have a situation where you have a panel, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And they say, you know, I don't really think we need a booster shot. And then you have the director, Dr. Rochelle Walensky, overruling that. Mm-hmm. Now, why would you have a panel if you're going to overrule that? And it's almost not a news item, but I was thinking back, you know, under Ronald Reagan, there was a cabinet officer they didn't like very well. His name was James Watt. Or even under Trump, there was a cabinet officer a lot of them didn't like, and that's Betsy DeVos. I can't imagine one of them overruling a panel and then not having the press just go crazy. But in this particular case, even though they said, you know, I don't think you need a booster shot, she said, no, we're going to make it available for not only people of a certain age, but those frontline workers and individuals that meet the public.
And I actually listened to several news stories over the past day or so when Rochelle Walensky, Dr. Rochelle Walensky, the head of the CDC, did that. And what the newscast says, it's unusual for the CDC director
yes, it is.
to overrule that, but that's within her power. And I just, because looking back on the Trump administration, the media were certain that the head of the CDC, Dr. Redfield and others, these were all political appointees who were just politically engaged in this, and they were politicizing the whole CDC. Rachel Walensky did this in part so that President Biden could say, we're moving forward quickly on the vaccine and we're making positive steps and so forth. And he had actually, for the past month or so, he had been pushing them to start accelerating the booster time and doing other things so that they could have that positive news and he could get the pandemic under control. Because remember, he had a plan to take care of the pandemic. And now people are saying, well, where was your plan? You campaigned on having a plan, and here it's coming back again, and nothing's happening. It's only getting worse.
Lathan Watts, I got to come to you. You know, we learned that, a bill starts in the House of Representatives, and then it goes to the Senate, and then they have a conference committee. It's signed by the president, and then the administration takes that legislation and implements it according to what was actually written in the law. It seems more and more that cabinet officers and this administrative state are making all the decisions for us.
Yeah, they are. I mean, what a quaint notion of lawmakers making laws and executive branch agencies enforcing them. It's only the prescribed method of how we do things here, according to the Constitution. But, for far too long, there have been people in both sides of the aisle. Okay, neither party has a monopoly on this. People in Congress who are willing to outsource that authority to the executive branch agency because well, that might be a controversial vote to take. And that might make it a little harder for me to get reelected if I have to take a stand on this. And they do, and the executive branch does the exact same thing on controversial social issues a lot of times, and they outsource it to the Supreme Court or the federal courts, where judges and justices are there and for life, never accountable to the voters. And so they're more than willing to let a controversial social policy like gay marriage or the transgender adding sexual orientation and transgender identity to the protections under the Civil Rights Act. They're happy to let the courts do that. That means they didn't have to, because they are responsible to us via the ballot box.
Yeah.
And those in the judicial branch aren't. And so that's why I said, when we were talking about earlier, you need to pay attention to the type of people that you're sending to do this job.
Very well
if
said.
they're not willing to take a stand on a controversial issue and even risk their seat according to principle, they are not worthy of the office.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, we've got to stop sending just whoever's got the best hair or the best hairpiece, and start sending some people who are there to do the job.
Just building on what you said, one of the reasons why Congress is so tied up right now is because what we understand is the moderate Democrats in the House don't want to take a vote on the $3.5 trillion bill if the infrastructure bill isn't going to pass first. And so they feel like that's a controversial vote, and they've told Nancy Pelosi, we don't want to take a vote on this $3.5 trillion bill unless we're sure it's going to pass, because that's a difficult vote for us, and we don't want to go back to our districts and then have to campaign if the bill's just going to die. And this goes back to the whole thing of, well, aren't you there to vote for what you think is right? But what you don't want to take the vote if you feel like you have to go back and defend it to your district because it's a vote that's just out of line with what you campaigned on.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that is we don't live in a pure democracy. When we are electing people, we're not picking a proxy vote. We're not just picking the guy who's going to sit in the chair and wait for us to call and say, yeah, vote this way. This is a republic. It's a representative democracy. We choose people to make decisions on our behalf. And therefore, how they make decisions and the principles they make them according to what principles they make them is the most important thing you can ask of anybody who is asking for your vote, because you don't get to tell them how to vote on every bill. You have to trust that if they tell you these are the principles I'm going to use, and more often than not, they're going to end up on an issue where you would, then that's the person that you want. Mm-hmm. You're not going to agree with everybody 100% of the time. I don't agree with everybody in my own house 100% of the time, right? But we've got to get people into office who understand what the job is, who want to do that job, who don't just want to be a part of the back and forth political gamesmanship. We've got to stop accepting gamesmanship as a substitute for statesmanship.
Would you not agree that this whole situation that we're discussing, it seems to me there's ignorance out there. Like, I think most students, if they were in here, even high school students or college students, a republic, what's that? I don't know what a republic is.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's some ignorance that I think is at the base.
Oh, certainly.
Behind all of this stuff.
Certainly. The only thing worse than not knowing what's in the Constitution is knowing things that aren't in the Constitution. Yeah. And Reagan said, many times, it's not that our friends on the other side of the aisle are ignorant, it's that they know so many things that just aren't so.
Right.
And so, you can lay this right at the feet of the American people, and I do so all the time. I give Congress a hard time, and they earn it. Okay.
Yep.
But we're the ones sending them there. It's as much our fault as it is theirs.
It seems to me that another thing we know for sure is that if you have a match challenge of $10,000 on the table and you call in with your gift of $50 a month, $100 a month for $1 a day at $30, that it will be matched dollar for dollar. Well, we're happen to be in that situation right now. Give us a call, won't you? And make your pledge of support. We still have more match challenge money available. I don't want to leave any of it on the table because we've got till the top of the hour to get it done. 800-347-5151. We got to get her done. 800-347-5151. And you can always give online at pointofview.net and see what free gifts we have for you as well for calling in your pledge at 800-347-5151. 5151.
Let me just say that as we go to a break, those of you listening online will hear Penna Dexter's commentary, even though she's not here today. When we come back, I want to talk about it for a minute, because sometimes people say, well, who's there to stop all the things that are happening? Well, in one case, it's a Senate parliamentarian that most of you probably have never heard of, yet it illustrates, again, something I think is very helpful. And it's part of that education process. We are trying to educate the next generation about these issues, and if you believe in that, I hope you'll join us, because we are just about out of time. 800-347-5151. We have a break coming back, and that will be it. Pointofview.net or 800-347-5151.
Right now, Elizabeth McDonough, the Senate parliamentarian, may be the most powerful public official you've never heard of. The debate in Congress on a proposed $3.5 trillion spending bill depends in great part on the advice she provides. The massive spending bill is jam-packed with progressive priorities, many of which involve big policy changes. Senate Democrats are attempting to pass it using a budget process called reconciliation. Legislation passed under reconciliation must be related more than incidentally to spending and revenue and cannot be filibustered. Hence, it requires only a majority, 51 votes, rather than the 60 a filibuster would require. As the Washington Post points out, progressive senators are trying to stuff a lot into that narrow definition. The bill isn't finalized, but 3 of the plan's proposals look a lot like brand new entitlement programs. One is universal pre-kindergarten. Another is up to 12 weeks of government-paid family leave. And thirdly, there's a proposal for free community college. There are also proposals to extend the COVID emergency child tax credit, expand Medicare, and implement many aspects of the Green New Deal. None of these are safety net programs for the poor. The Wall Street Journal explains they are explicitly designed to make the middle class dependent on government handouts. The parliamentarian is the rule keeper of the Senate. It's a nonpartisan job, and Elizabeth McDonough has held it for 10 years. Her job is to advise senators in a nonpartisan way during legislative battles on what they can and can't do. The Post cites former Senate historian Donald Ritchie, who says the parliamentarian, acting as a sort of umpire, doesn't write the rules, she enforces them. Ms. McDonough heard arguments by senators from both parties about whether granting green cards to some 8 million people here illegally is primarily a budgetary decision. She says it isn't. She knows her stuff. Pray she continues to decide wisely. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Point of View Truth Team, unchanging truth in a changing world.
It has been about 25 years since God providentially led me to Point of View when I did not even know it existed. During this time, I have shared numerous taped programs with my family and incorporated the Outlook magazine and other articles into the homeschool curriculum I used in teaching our 5 children. Back 25 years ago, I had to put a big box radio with a recorder strategically in a corner so that I could hear that message. Point of View receives no government funding, for which I am grateful. It is therefore my honor, privilege, and responsibility to support this organization of tremendous self-sacrificing people on a monthly financial basis and to put courage into them through letters and specific prayers as they have become like family to me.
Point of View Truth Team, unchanging truth in a changing world.
Back for the last few minutes of our Truth Team Week, and if you have not made that phone call, time to make that phone call right now, 800-347-5151. One of the things that I mentioned just a minute ago is Penna Dexter's commentary, which you can hear online, or also we encourage you to sign up to receive the commentaries. Hers arrives on Saturday. Mine come to your inbox Monday through Friday. But Dr. Merrill Matthews, before we hear from some of our other callers, I wanted to maybe just get your thoughts, because sometimes people say, is there anybody up there to stop this legislation or to cause people to think about this from a constitutional point of view? And the Senate parliamentarian that Penna talks about actually has stood up and said, wait a minute, you're trying to add an amnesty bill in this particular piece of legislation. It doesn't belong. And horror of horrors, is because it doesn't fit according to the rules of the Senate and the Constitution.
Under the reconciliation process, which is what they're trying to move this through because they can bypass the filibuster, a piece of legislation, an element, has to have a significant impact on the budget. So it can't just be something else. You can't name post offices and other things in there. And what's happened is that the Senate parliamentarian has been really strong on this, and we need to highlight her courage, because there is a process whereby the Democrats in control of the Senate could get rid of her if they wanted to. And there have been efforts to say, we need to do that so we can just go by the parliamentarian and go ahead and do what we want to. So she stood up on these on several occasions now, because there was an issue of whether or not they could do the reconciliation more than once a year. And she had sort of left the door open that might be the case. Chuck Schumer came up and said, we can do all we want to in reconciliation. No. It's really got to be once a year, and you can come back and tweak what you did, but you can't just come up and do that. So she's been a courageous woman in standing up for that.
I would imagine right now, Lathan Watts, that whether your name is Joe Manchin or Senator Sinema, or Elizabeth McDonough, who is the parliamentarian, there's a lot of pressure on some of these individuals.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, they're running out of time. They realize you got a midterm election coming up. You got a 50-50 split in the Senate and a 3-vote margin in the House. And, even as good as the Republicans are at forming circular firing squads, that even they might be able to take back the House if they only have to get like a +5 and not much
talking
different
about
in the
a
Senate.
+40 on some of these surveys right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
So yeah, they know. And this is one thing that the Democrats tend to do better than Republicans, and that is when they have the means to do something, they will do it. And let the political chips fall where they may. That's how they put Obamacare through. They lost control of the Senate by ramming through Obamacare, and they were willing to do it because they understand that the closest, I think it's another Reagan quote, the closest thing to eternal life on earth is a government program.
Yep.
They know that if they can get it started, it is nearly impossible to stop it. And they are willing to lose seats over it, lose control over it, if they can get it done. And that's what they're trying to do. That's why I'm sure Joe Manchin is under a tremendous amount of pressure. And Kristen Sinema is under a tremendous amount of pressure. So people should pray for them that they stick to their guns, because they're the only thing standing between the Senate changing the filibuster rules in order to get this stuff done.
Well, again, we have a match on the table, dollar for dollar match, but let's again hear from some of you that have supported Point of View.
Point of View Truth Team.
But I feel it's so important that we know what's going on, and you folks do a great job of it. And I also had joined, it's the best thing to do. Like somebody said, they do $1 a day, and they don't feel that so much. At the end of the month, they've got $30 to send right off. And it's up to us citizens to pay attention and do what we can, and to pray and to help you out as much as we can.
Thank you so much for everything that everyone in that room does, and that we need this show like you wouldn't believe.
My husband and I are your supporters. We just really appreciate the show and the people you bring on.
Yes, thank you for, first of all, what you do. And I just wanted to say that your program is giving us a voice, and I want to thank you for that.
So I've been listening to y'all for years. I'm not a politico whatsoever. I believe in voting, yes. But if it weren't for y'all, I wouldn't know how to vote. I'm serious. I wouldn't know the first thing about voting, but I do now.
Point of View, Truth Team 360.
Again, we wouldn't tell you how to vote, but we give you some principles so that you knew to vote. And some individuals, Brad, have said, I'll be honest, I've never contacted my member of Congress, but now you make it so easy with the take action items. So the one at the moment on H.R. 4, we'll be talking about some of these other issues next week. And so we give you some marching orders. But the marching orders for the last few minutes on the air are to give us a call at 800-347-5151.
This is not rocket science. We're simply asking for you to share in your resources with what we're doing, and so we can continue doing what we do, as I keep saying, bigger and better. And there's the midterms coming up. I think that's enough reason right there to pick up the phone and give us a call with your support, because this is a big deal, a really big deal of where the country could go. 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Of course, you can always give at pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
Some of you may be saying, gosh, I would like to hear a little bit more from Dr. Merrill Matthews and Lathan Watts, because, of course, today we've also had to focus on the whole issue of the Truth Team, but they'll be with us next Friday. So you'll get 2 hours uninterrupted from both of these individuals. But if you find yourself saying, I'd like to know a little bit more, we have a link to firstliberty.org. You can also go to First Liberty Live and all sorts of things, and Supreme Coup, and we've got all those links on there. And for the Institute for Policy Innovation, IPI.org. And again, if you've got questions about vaccines, about funding, about religious liberty, these are 2 excellent websites that we encourage you to go to. And that's just another aspect of that. We actually bring to you individuals that we think deserve your attention. We also encourage you to not only support us and to support the local station that is carrying this program, but to support these worthy organizations as well. But Brad, we're down literally to the last minute. And let me first of all say thank you for joining us again. I know you got a lot of things to do, but you give us a week here on air, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here. And, it's a critical point in our country's history right now, and Point of View is a part of that. 800-347-5151. Well, the phones will be open after we go off the air, by the way. 800-347-5151. Thank you, Kerby.
And I also want to thank Doug as our engineer, as well as Steve as our producer. I would like to thank all the people answering the phones, but even if I said it, they wouldn't know, because most of them are on the phone right now.
That's a good thing.
They wouldn't have a chance to hear that. But as Brad just pointed out, we're going to go off the air in less than a minute. And so as a result, that will be it. But you can still call 800-347-5151. Or if you just don't have access to a phone right now, at any point, you can go to pointofview.net. On Monday, I'll try to give you an update, but I think we made the match. I hope we did. And it has been not the easiest week, but it's certainly been one where we thank those of you that actually stepped up and supported us as well. I hope you have a great weekend. We have a lot more to cover, as you might know. So have a great weekend. We'll see you back here on Monday on Point of View.
Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. That's why in nearly 50 years of broadcasting, Point of View has stayed committed to our mission to help people live out God's truth. Political debates change from one election year to the next. Hot-button controversies come and they go. As Christians in a changing world, we must rely on God's unchanging truth. If we know how to apply His truth to our lives, it doesn't matter what comes next. We'll be equipped to face it. Yet so many Americans, even believers, lack a biblical worldview. They want to walk in God's truth, but they've never heard someone apply it to daily life the way that we do on Point of View. You can change that by joining the Truth Team today. By joining the Truth Team, you can have a lasting impact, equipping tens of thousands of Americans to live out God's truth for decades to come. Join now at pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.